Nicodemus here. I told a small lie so both my kids could talk on the phone, and somehow it turned into a full blown safety drama. Let's unpack how fear twists the truth.
Yeah, this is an important thing to understand, especially what the Course says is, people ask me this all the time is, how do I know if I've listened to the Holy Spirit or the ego? And a very simple way of knowing is, what is the result? What shows up? What shows up in the relationship? What shows up in the space? So even with maybe you had the best of intentions, a couple things to look at is number one, where do we bend the truth? Where do we push those limits? And maybe we hide things. That itself is a place of weakness in us when we do that. Now, we could have the best of intentions, and I know in 12 steps they say, you don't want to use honesty if it's going to hurt yourself or the other person. So it also makes sense in the situation where you might bend the truth because somebody's sensitive or you don't want to hurt them. You want to really ultimately look at what is the result. If pain shows up, then there's a place to look in ourself of where we operated from, what our values are. This is why things like honesty and integrity and being transparent and communicating as though I'm not winning unless the other person's winning. Now, in relationship, it can get really complicated. And I want to read something from the Course that says, this is from chapter 14, section 11. It says, you have one test, as sure as God, by which to recognize if what you learned is true. Now, remember, we're always teaching and learning every moment. It says, if you are wholly free of fear of any kind, and if all those who meet or even think of you share in your perfect peace, then you can be sure that you have learned God's lesson and not your own. So if conflict shows up, even in the other person, where the only place for me to look is where am I coming from? Where am I operating from that shows up? Not just even in the relationship, but if we really take it to ultimate accountability, ultimate responsibility, it's how does even it show up in the world? So let's go on. It says, that you can be sure that you've learned God's lesson, not your own. Unless all this is true, there are dark lessons in your mind that hurt and hinder you and everyone around you. Now, this is a complicated part of the Course because it's saying that even anyone who thinks of us, well, what about the people that don't like us? What about the people ultimately that maybe don't think of us with peace? Well, think of this just for a moment. And I want you to maybe take your vision and make it really big, is that actually our job is all beings waking up. So wherever there's fear in anyone, our work's still not done. Because ultimately, when we wake up to the light in ourselves, it impacts all of creation. So it's important that the goal is that everyone that we meet and everyone that thinks of us and that we think of them, there's perfect peace. That's ultimately the goal of all of the atonement. Now, bringing it practical for us in our life, where do we bend the truth? Where do we hide? Where do we defend? Where are we always strategizing? What Jesus says in Lesson 135 is that anytime we plan the future, activate the past, or organize the present as we wish, all of those are defenses. And if you think about this, we all learn to defend against the world and to defend against things that we think could hurt us or hurt the ones we love. So we construct all of these defenses, all of these strategies that we learn from childhood on how to survive in the world, and ultimately make, our dream, as the Course would say, better for us and protecting ourselves. So what we want to do, first off, we also get to forgive ourselves for mistakes. That's the thing that he says in the Course, is that errors are easily correctable by the Holy Spirit. And if it's showing up, there's still a lesson. And then when we get it, it just doesn't show up. Now, in this situation, maybe it's a close family member, maybe it's a parent of a child, an ex, partner in a relationship. All of those people that really, they bring that up in us are really gifts. And that as we learn to keep forgiving, they represent an amazing opportunity to come back and choose again. So wherever there's errors, the Holy Spirit can correct them for us. And that's why these things show up, because they give us another opportunity to choose peace again, to choose forgiveness again. He goes on, he says, the absence of perfect peace means but one thing. You think that you do not will for God's Son what his Father wills for him. So it's all will and God's will are split, and they're really ultimately against each other. He says every dark lesson teaches this in one form or another, and each bright lesson with which the Holy Spirit will replace the dark ones that you do not accept teaches you that you will with the Father and his Son. And that ultimately all of our wills is peace. All of our wills is joy and freedom. And what we want to do is offer that to everyone in relationship, everyone that ultimately that we meet, to all beings. So if conflict is showing up, first off, forgive yourself if you feel like you had the intention and it was a good intention. One of the things he says in the course, he says, trust not your good intentions. They're not enough. Trust implicitly your willingness, no matter what else enters. And don't worry that dark shadows surround the holy instant. If they weren't there, we'd have no need of a holy instant. So it's not just about our good intentions, it's our willingness to teach peace, to be ultimately the light. And when we fall down, we get to forgive ourselves, pick ourselves back up. And what you might find is that owning up to it, it very often, can heal the relationship. Because anytime you see someone in pain because of any action that you did, or anytime I see anyone in pain because of any action I did, I ultimately want to learn forgiveness. I want to forgive myself and extend forgiveness to them. Now, they might not forgive you right away, and that's okay. But what Jesus says in the course, it's not up to us to know when that the holy relationship is merged and it becomes a holy relationship, or the holy instant when someone else chooses it and has the miracle. That's not up to us. Our job is to allow correction in our own minds and then come back to the light and extend that. Now, what does that look like practically? It might look like an apology. It might look like owning up and say, you know what? I bent the truth in this situation and I did it with good intentions. I care about my boys and I want them to be in a relationship with each other. And I was doing it to protect you or protect the situation. And in that, you're owning up to your errors. And that's itself takes courage and strength to own up to when we operated from wrong-mindedness, and we know because we could see the results. Did peace show up in that person in the relationship, or did conflict show up in that person in the relationship? And if conflict showed up, we don't want to add to the conflict by beating ourselves up and condemning ourselves or the other person. What we want to do is allow correction to come, allow forgiveness to come, and extend that to the relationship and choose again. And we keep choosing again until ultimately the miracle love is what we extend to each relationship and ultimately to all beings.